Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lesly Palacio. The next major breakthrough came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. Police eventually contacted Eric's cousin, who reported that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they planned to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested assistance from the FBI because they could not resolve the jurisdictional issue on their own. The investigation slowed down in January 2021, but for months after the discovery of the girl's remains, Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, and everyone was greatly relieved that at least one fugitive was now in custody. The man was quickly extradited back to Clark County and charged with destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. During interrogations, Jose tried to minimize his involvement in the crime, explaining the story of the trip to Mexico by his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th. However, investigators showed surveillance video footage that debunked his false claims, clearly showing him helping carry Lesly's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Faced with the evidence, Jose changed his testimony. He said he was working in the garage when Eric brought Lesly's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the garage. According to Jose, he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, assuming that Lesly had died of an overdose of illegal drugs because he saw no visible injuries on the body. Court documents indicate that Jose initially told police that, according to Eric, Lesly died of an overdose of illegal drugs. Jose also explained that Eric immediately talked about wanting to end his life, and he decided that the best thing to do for his son was to take him to Mexico. When investigators asked Jose for Eric's current whereabouts, he explained that as soon as the two of them entered Mexico and boarded the bus was searched by Mexican authorities. He and his son got scared and decided to split up, thinking that apart, it would be harder for the authorities to find them. For this reason, he would love to help the investigation, but has absolutely no idea where his son might be. On June 18, 2021, Jose formally pleaded guilty to destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. Despite the horrific characteristics of his crimes, Jose was sentenced to only 2 years in the Clark County Detention Center, causing shock and dismay in the community. The Palacio family was shocked and outraged by Jose's lenient sentence, which they felt was unjust. During the pandemonium, Jose joined the court proceedings virtually, while Lesly's family and friends attended in person. They urged the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was not enough for an accessory to murder who helped dispose of the body and hid the perpetrator. Jose pleaded guilty and tried to apologize to the Palacio family, saying his love for his son outweighed him. He expressed regret for his actions, but the Palacio family did not accept his apology and did not consider it since, to date, Eric's whereabouts remain unknown and he continues to live a free life in Mexico. Jose was released on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the attorney and representative of the Palacio family, commented that she is absolutely furious and that this is simply unfair. Not only is the main suspect not in custody, but the one who was involved in covering up the murder is back in custody after serving only 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palacio family has never gotten justice, and Lesly's story highlights the flaws in the justice system and raises questions about fairness in dealing with serious crimes. The Palacio family is determined to fight to change the law in Nevada because they believe that whoever was involved in the murder should receive a longer prison sentence than 2 years. They hope that the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where he will be charged and given the punishment he deserves. Ofalia Markarian is directly reaching out to those who may know of Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, and in every media interview she calls for the Palacio family to be given a small measure of justice. Lesly's discovery of her calling was unexpected, but she soon became an integral part of the team. Her colleagues regarded her as a responsible, professional lab technician and a warm, responsive person. While her duties involved conducting various analyses and tests, Lesly saw her role as more than just fulfilling duties. She was driven to make the testing process as comfortable as possible for patients. Her caring and patient nature created an atmosphere of trust, putting even the most apprehensive individuals at ease. When a young nurse asked if Lesly was afraid of getting her hands pierced all the time, she replied with a laugh that she now had a super ability to poke people. Her optimistic vitality was evident in every action. By all accounts, Lesly had the unique potential to become a sought-after specialist in medical laboratory diagnostics, and she would have, if not for a dramatic turn of events. Since childhood, Lesly had been accustomed to helping and caring for others. As the second of 5 daughters, she took on a maternal role when her mother, Lesly Palacio, worked as a hotel cleaner. Rosilia remembered Lesly kicking her out of the kitchen when she tried to cook dinner after cleaning over 15 hotel rooms in a shift, gently urging her to rest. Lesly took it upon herself to prepare dinners, finding cooking to be a source of inspiration. From then on, she made sure her family members were well fed, even when she was away, calling home to ensure everyone had eaten. For Lesly, family was her top priority, and she easily inspired her sisters with her energy and ideas. Even during the pandemic, Lesly didn't let her love of sports fade away. She organized workouts in her backyard and taught her mom various exercises. She also danced daily in front of the mirror with her sister to music. Lesly's passion for experimenting with hair colors and image inspired her to create a joint business plan with her older sister to open a boutique. They started designing and sewing dresses at home in their own unique style. When Rosilia got laid off due to downsizing during the pandemic, Lesly suggested that her mom start her own small cleaning company. She promised to help her mom with cleaning services in her free time from work and school. At a family council, Lesly reassured her mom, "We'll be fine soon, you'll see." They came up with a name for the company, Palacio Cleaning Service. Lesly's dreams were finally taking shape as their family firm landed its first contract. But on August 29, 2020, all their plans and dreams came to a halt. By the end of August 2020, Lesly had completed the lab assistant program, and the family firm received a large order. Feeling stressed and worried, Lesly decided it was time to take a break and enjoy an evening of dancing and fun. With pandemic restrictions slowly lifting and Las Vegas coming alive, she felt it was the perfect time to unwind. Lesly's friends refused to accompany her, even though people were gradually overcoming their fears and returning to their normal routines. They were still uneasy about being in crowded, enclosed spaces. Despite this, Lesly remained hopeful of finding someone to share a fun evening with, so she posted on Instagram about her desire to do something unexpected. To her surprise, Eric Rangel Ibarra responded to her post. Lesly and Eric's families had attended the same church for 14 years and occasionally socialized, making them childhood acquaintances, though they had never been close. Lesly was aware of Eric's interests and had received friendly texts from him in the past, but she had never reciprocated his attention. She had always been polite to him, though. Ordinarily, Lesly would have turned down Eric's offer to keep her company, but this time, she was eager to break the monotony of her daily life with a fun evening, so she decided to accept his proposal. Lesly's friends were busy, so she took Eric up on his offer to share Las Vegas nightlife stories. Despite some unease, she decided going out with Eric was better than staying solo. Lesly regularly checked in with her sister, detailing her whereabouts and activities. When she mentioned Eric wasn't drinking, Kayla joked about healthy living. Eric and Lesly's first destination was the casino at the Longhorn Hotel. They arrived at 1:31 a.m. on August 29th in Eric's white Ford F-250, as shown by the surveillance footage reviewed by the police later. The couple spent about 25 minutes inside the casino, leaving at 1:56 a.m. After their casino visit, Lesly kept her sister updated on their activities, sending a message at 4:40 a.m. However, Leslie's next message was alarming, saying, "I need to talk to you about something shitty." Her sister inquired about the issue, but Lesly didn't respond. Instead, a text box appeared, indicating that Lesly had started to type a response, but never sent it. Unfortunately, this was the last message Lesly sent during her lifetime. The following morning, Lesly still hadn't returned home, and her family grew increasingly worried as the hours passed. Initially, they assumed Lesly had spent the night at Eric's house, but as time went on, their confusion deepened. Eventually, the family decided to check on Lesly at Eric's house, where they stumbled upon a suspicious scene. Eric's mother and daughter were removing furniture, pretending they had only just learned that Lesly and Eric had been together the previous evening. Fortunately, Leslie's family arrived at Eric's house just in time, preventing a significant delay in the investigation. The police found bloodstains in the house and a messy bedroom, suggesting that Eric's mother and sister had spent the day packing up their belongings, including furniture, instead of cleaning up evidence of a crime. This indicated that they were not going on a short trip, but rather planning a long-term absence, likely to reunite with Eric and his father, Jose, who had fled to Mexico to avoid prosecution. When Mrs. Ibarra met the Palacio family, she likely realized their chance to escape had passed, and the panicked mother and daughter began denying any knowledge of Leslie's evening with Eric. Their suspicious behavior aroused suspicion that something serious had occurred. Luckily, the Las Vegas police acted quickly, issuing a billing inquiry to track Leslie's movements from the previous night. Although it took time to receive the data, the Palacio family didn't wait and launched a campaign to spread the word about Leslie's disappearance. The community responded, sharing the information on social media, and surprisingly, many people, including Eric's mom, showed they cared. Detectives continued to question Mrs. Ibarra, seeking more information, and on August 31st, she went to the police station to file a missing persons report for her husband and son. Mrs. Ibarra claimed that her son, Eric, had left their home late on the evening of August 28th, returning the next morning, behaving strangely. She watched as he walked out the door again, but this time, he never came back. Police probed Leslie's disappearance and that of Eric and his dad. The Las Vegas police joined the case, searching for clues. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, seeking surveillance cameras. They found cameras at a house opposite Jose Barr's home, which might yield crucial evidence. They also obtained billing records, tracking Leslie's movements on August 29th, shedding light on the mystery. Detectives discovered that the couple visited a casino and then went to a grill bar, arriving around 2:15 a.m. Leslie's cell phone was left behind at the bar, and records show that she left the establishment around 5:50 a.m. Shortly after, at 6:05 a.m., neighborhood cameras captured Eric's car pulling up to their family home. The footage clearly showed that Lesly was heavily intoxicated as Eric assisted her out of the car and into the house. Later at 7:25 a.m., Eric and his father Jose were seen carrying Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, out of the house and placing it in the trunk of the car. Eric then drove away, while Jose hosed down the driveway to their house. This suggested that Eric and Jose were not missing persons, but rather fugitives trying to avoid justice. After reviewing the footage, police obtained a search warrant for Eric's home, leading to the discovery of additional evidence indicating that Lesly did not leave the house voluntarily. The house had been cleaned with strong cleaning products in an attempt to conceal evidence, and latex gloves and trash bags were also found. Furthermore, traces of blood were discovered on the floor and bed in Eric's room, strongly suggesting an assault. Without DNA testing, it was evident to investigators that the blood belonged to Lesly. From that point on, the search for Lesly Palacio focused on finding her body. Meanwhile, Eric and Jose were reported missing, and investigators worked to identify suspects. The Palacio family, shaken by the events, also took action. Roselia, Leslie's mother, reached out to the church community for help in searching for her daughter's body. As a result, Search volunteers, flyers, and posters featuring Lesly's photo and images of Eric and Jose began circulating on social media, in newspapers, and on street poles. The family appealed to the public to assist in finding the two men involved in Lesly's death. The first significant breakthrough in the investigation came when a license plate reader detected Eric's car just 6 miles from his home at 10 a.m., about 4 hours after Lesly's alleged murder. This discovery led investigators to believe that the body might be hidden within a 4-hour drive from Eric's home, possibly on the Nevada-Arizona border or in the Charleston Peak area. This was still a vast region, and detectives were eager for any additional information that could help them pinpoint a more specific location. Once again, luck was on their side when a gas station 40 miles north of Las Vegas captured footage of Eric's car pulling off the highway toward the Valley of Fire National Park. 20 minutes later, the car reappeared with muddy tires. This discovery narrowed the search area and indicated that the body was likely to be found within 20 miles of the gas station. The presence of mud on the tires suggested that Eric had driven off the road at some point. Detectives searched the area, and on September 9th, during a second search, they found Lesly Palacio's body hidden behind a bush. News outlets immediately broke the story. The body of 22-year-old Lesly Palacio had been found near the Valley of Fire 11 days after she went missing. A reporter joined the broadcast providing additional details about the prime suspect, 25-year-old Eric Rangel Ibarra. The Valley of Fire, where the body was found, is known for its extremely hot climate, which led to rapid decomposition of the remains. As a result, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of death. Locals were horrified and fearful after Lesly's death, with some becoming too afraid to venture outside due to the constant thoughts of the notorious criminals involved in the murder. The day after Lesly's body was found, September 10th, a large crowd comprising friends, relatives, neighbors, and local residents gathered to pay their respects to her memory. They took the candles used in the nightly vigil and placed them in front of her house, expressing their desire for the perpetrator to face justice for his heinous act. At this point, the quest for justice was far from over. A major breakthrough in the case came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. This led police to contact Eric's cousin, who revealed that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they intended to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested the FBI's assistance due to jurisdictional issues they couldn't resolve on their own. Although the investigation slowed down in January 2021, there was a significant development months after the girls' remains were discovered. Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, bringing relief that at least one fugitive was now in custody. Jose was quickly extradited back to Clark County, where he was charged with destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. During questioning, Jose attempted to downplay his role in the crime, citing his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th as the reason for their trip to Mexico. However, investigators presented surveillance video footage that contradicted his false claims, clearly showing him helping to carry Lesly's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Jose altered his testimony when confronted with the evidence. According to his revised account, he was working in the garage when Eric arrived with Lesly's body, wrapped in a sheet. Jose claimed he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, believing Lesly had died from a drug overdose due to the lack of visible injuries. Initially, Jose told police that Eric had stated Lesly died from a drug overdose. Jose also recalled that Eric had suicidal thoughts and, as a concerned father, decided to take him to Mexico. When questioned about Eric's current location, Jose explained that after crossing into Mexico and boarding a bus, they were searched by Mexican authorities. Feeling frightened, they decided to separate, thinking it would be harder for authorities to track them down. As a result, Jose was willing to cooperate with the investigation, but genuinely had no idea where his son was. On June 18, 2021, Jose pleaded guilty to destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. Despite the heinous nature of his crimes, he was sentenced to just 2 years at the Clark County Detention Center, a decision that shocked and outraged the community. The Palacio family was particularly appalled by the lenient sentence, which they considered unfair. During the sentencing hearing, Jose participated virtually, while Lesly's family and friends attended in person. They implored the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was insufficient punishment for an accessory to murder who had helped dispose of the body and conceal the perpetrator. Jose apologized to the Palacio family, stating that his love for his son had outweighed his moral obligations. He expressed remorse for his actions, but the Palacio family rejected his apology, citing that Eric's whereabouts remain unknown to this day, and he continues to live freely in Mexico. Jose was released from detention on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the Palacio family's attorney and representative, is outraged over the glaring injustice in the handling of Lesly's murder case. Despite the primary suspect remaining at large, the individual who aided in covering up the crime has been released from custody after serving a mere 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palacio family is still awaiting justice, and Lesly's story highlights the flaws in the justice system, sparking concerns about the fairness of handling serious crimes. The family is determined to push for legal reform in Nevada, advocating for those involved in the murder to face longer prison sentences than 2 years. They hope the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where they will receive the punishment they deserve. Through media interviews, Ofalia Markarian is making a direct appeal to anyone with information about Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, urging them to come forward so the Palacio family can finally receive some measure of justice. The case of the Buchanan family. Molly met Adam Buchanan, a divorced father of 1, when she applied for an office manager position at his company. At the time, Adam was raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Molly, a cheerful and sociable blonde, immediately caught the attention of the company owner, and the interest was mutual. They started a romance, which turned into a serious relationship, and Molly eventually moved in with Adam. Molly, who dreamed of a loving and friendly family, made an effort to build a strong bond with her stepson Nolan. Soon, she became pregnant, and they had a son named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a close-knit family of 4. Adam, who owned a construction company, earned a comfortable living, and the family even purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The cabin was rustic with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. But Adam, being in the construction business, actively worked on remodeling it, and the family frequently visited the cabin. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coloma and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found that the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property, and the cabin had burned to the ground, with charred remains in the ashes. The fire department personnel left the scene untouched. At 11 a.m., firefighters alerted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office to the fire scene, unsure of what they were dealing with. Initially, they suspected a pet might be trapped inside the house. However, upon arriving, the coroner faced a challenging situation. The house was still smoldering, making it impossible to inspect the interior. They had to wait for the flames to die down and the temperature to decrease. Once the coroner could examine the house, they detected the pungent smell of burnt flesh and soon discovered a human skull and charred torso. It became apparent that the tragedy had claimed a life. The officer called for backup, and additional officers from the sheriff's office arrived to conduct a meticulous investigation of the scene. The evidence led to an obvious conclusion: the isolated cabin, located in a remote area, was not the primary residence of its owners, but rather a vacation retreat. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the adjacent property, and running the license plates could identify the owner. It was possible that the owner was the wildfire victim. It was quickly discovered that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by Adam Buchanan. Buchanan, the owner, lived 160 miles away from the accident scene, a 3-hour drive from Bonita, California. This information supported the police's initial assumption that the house served as a country retreat for city dwellers who vacationed there to escape the hustle and bustle. It remained unclear who was inside, the company's owner, Mr. Buchanan, or someone else. The detectives began their investigation with the owner's name as their first clue. The Bonita police officer's task was to verify that all of Buchanan's family members were safe and at home. At the correct address, the officers arrived at the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. When they knocked on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage answered, looking surprised, and asked what had brought them to his doorstep. To avoid alarming the household, the officers decided to first establish who was present in the house. They didn't want to assume that the company car's disappearance was necessarily linked to the owner himself. It could have been taken by someone else from the company. Nolan Buchanan informed the officers that his father, Adam, had left for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with his partner Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, and they were expected to return in the evening. According to Nolan, his father had entrusted him with taking care of the house. Although the remains found in the cabin were not yet confirmed to be those of the Buchanans, the information gathered and the discovery of 2 sets of remains by the evening of September 13th were enough to declare the family missing. The El Dorado County Police visited Nolan's home on September 14th to question him further and determine who had perished in the fire. However, they were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan, who explained that their son, the cabin's owner, regularly visited the property to perform his own repairs. The parents were extremely worried, having been unable to contact their son or daughter-in-law until then. The officers learned that the house relied on generators for power, but it had no electricity at the time of the incident. The presence of gas cylinders inside the cabin led to 2 possible theories. The fire could have been either an accident or intentional. By Sep 15th, investigators collected evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit, which changed the case's direction. A skull with a bullet hole was found, revealing a homicide, not an accidental fire. Forensic DNA testing showed the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull belonged to a child, making murder the primary focus. The fire was intentionally set to destroy evidence. Next, investigators sought to determine the circumstances. Burglary gone wrong, family suicide, or a grudge against Adam Buchanan of Buchanan Construction? Investigators pursued the theory that Molly's murder was a crime of passion, examining her life for enemies and her marriage for clues. As leads dried up, they focused on the troubled relationship, marked by abuse, sleeping apart, and intense arguments. Molly's mother feared they'd kill each other, yet Molly stuck with Adam, briefly fleeing with their son. The couple enjoyed hunting near home, where guns were common. Police suspected another fight escalated. One spouse shot the other, then took their own life. However, an inconsistency emerged. If the tragedy was caused by a conflict between the husband and wife, logic dictates that the instrument of the crime would be found near the remains of one of them. But this was not the case. Investigators theorized that the weapon might have been damaged in the fire, making it less conspicuous than expected. Over 5 days, forensic team members meticulously sifted through the ashes in the home, conducting a meticulous search. Despite their thoroughness, they did not find the expected result. No weapons were discovered in the house. By this time, the forensic examination results were in. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies matched Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All three victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the possibility of suicide. The lack of firearms suggested that a fourth person, unknown until then, was present in the house, shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start anew. Police had no option but to turn to 16-year-old Nolan, the son of the deceased. Nolan informed the officers that his family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. According to Nolan, his father chose to use the company vehicle instead of his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because the truck and trailer were already loaded with rocks to decorate the area around his country cabin. This was the truck that police found near the burned structure. When questioned about why he didn't accompany his relatives on vacation, Nolan reiterated that he had to stay behind to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that there was a neighbor growing illegal marijuana on the edge of the Buchanan property, which had led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor, with his father demanding that the neighbor stop planting it and threatening to report the issue to the police. When discussing the family business, Nolan revealed the company's financial struggles, including downsizing and a significant reduction in employees from what his father had mentioned. The business debts were accumulating rapidly. The investigation now had valuable information and a suspect, specifically a neighbor, given the common link between violent crime and illegal drug cultivation in that area. The detectives believed the threat of reporting to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. However, the issue was that they didn't know which neighbor they should focus on. After the family's murder, the financial crisis engulfing their business had to be addressed. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and questioned the employees. As Nolan had warned, the company was in dire straits, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, some employees lost their jobs. Interestingly, some of the fired employees were bitterly unhappy with their dismissal and could potentially be suspects in the crime. During a community cleanup, students found a purse with Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's IDs and a .22 caliber rifle hidden nearby. This led detectives to a new theory. The killer used the rifle and took their documents to cover tracks. The discovery was crucial because it suggested that the killer had gone to great lengths to reach Greenwood, murder the family, and then return to Bonita to get rid of the evidence. This suggested that the killer was likely a local resident of Bonita. The fact that the evidence was found near the location of Buchanan Construction reinforced the theory that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Detectives sent the gun and the bag of documents to be examined and requested a warrant to search the company's records and premises. Here, during the search, they discovered a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises, which was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. Since it was known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, the investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a white Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had initially told them. This discovery revealed that Adam had deliberately misled the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators decided to re-interview Nolan, aiming to keep him safe while gathering as much information as possible. This time, they asked him specific questions, such as what movie he had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. Unaware of the implications, Nolan mentioned that he had used his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search the Buchanan home in Bonita, search their vehicles, and examine their financial records. The Ford automobile sat in the driveway, its wheels caked with reddish soil, similar to that found in Greenwood. This suggested that the car had recently been driven on the dirt roads of Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip earlier, some soil might have remained on the wheels, but it wouldn't have been as noticeable. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed any wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Further investigation revealed that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at a Taco Bell fast food chain on his way to Greenwood. However, Nolan claimed he stayed home and didn't accompany his parents, and that he had the credit card in his possession. Detectives reviewed the security cameras at the diner and saw what they expected: a white Ford, not a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that listed 4 drinks, not 3. Similarly, evidence collected at the scene of the fire pointed to 4 drink cups, indicating that Nolan had been in the car. On Saturday, September 12th, Adam and Molly used a credit card at the Valencia Club Bar in Penin, about 30 minutes from the cabin. This was a familiar spot for the couple, as they would often stop by after working on the cabin. Security cameras at the bar recorded the time they left, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track their route back to the cabin. The cameras showed that a Ford F-150, driven by Adam and Molly, headed towards the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire. Then at 3:30 a.m., the same vehicle was spotted driving in the opposite direction, but this time with only Nolan inside. Later that morning, on Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to make purchases at 3 different businesses in Bonita: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed that Adam only had 1 credit card, which contradict Nolan's previous statements. By the time the forensic results were back, Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun, leading to his arrest in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan maintained he was not guilty of the charges against him, and instead, he spun a tale claiming his father had shot the family, then pointed a rifle at him. Nolan said he took the weapon away in self-defense, accidentally shooting his father in the process. Nolan attributed his subsequent actions, including setting the house on fire, to a state of panic and extreme fear. Throughout the trial, the defense emphasized Adam's history of abuse towards Nolan and other family members. However, the medical examiner questioned the verdict due to the inconsistent angle of the bullet wound on Gavin's skull, suggesting it was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan countered that he and his brother's beds were adjacent, and they were both awakened by the noise and screaming. He claimed to have seen someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin, then pointed the rifle at him. According to Nolan, he pushed the attacker away, which would have resulted in a shot fired at around a 45 degrees angle, contradicting the forensic evidence. The prosecution's theory is that Nolan killed his brother when they were alone in the house, while their parents were out at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot and killed them as well, as evidenced by the position of the bodies. The sequence of events suggests that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Next, Nolan took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met up with his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, thereby establishing an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury delivered a guilty verdict on 3 counts of first-degree murder against Nolan. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In announcing the sentence, Judge Kingsbury acknowledged the verbal and physical abuse Nolan had suffered, as well as the testimony that he killed his brother to spare him from further suffering at their father's hands. However, she also highlighted the premeditation of the crime, the subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and Nolan's plans to take over the family business, which he had shared with relatives. The judge referenced Nolan's failure to comply with rules and erratic behavior, as reported by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where he was sent following his arrest. The judge informed Nolan that he, like anyone, has the opportunity to reform, and that if he exhibits good behavior, he may be eligible for parole in 25 years. Despite this, Nolan maintains his innocence, and if he is eventually granted parole, he will be required to pay a substantial amount of compensation to the victims, the exact sum of which has not yet been determined. The case of the Winkler family. On March 22, 2006, the small town of Selmer, Tennessee was shaken when it received terrible news. 31-year-old pastor Matthew Winkler was brutally murdered in his own home, and his wife Mary and their 3 daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Mary Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, vanished without a trace. That evening, Matthew failed to attend the Church of Christ service with his family, which was out of character for the responsible pastor, who always informed others if he needed to miss an event. What's more, none of the family members answered their phone, which added to the growing unease. Concerned community members decided to visit the Winklers' residence to investigate and offer help if needed. When they arrived, the house appeared normal, with no signs of forced entry or anything suspicious. Inside, lights were on in several rooms, and a television was playing loudly in one room, giving the impression that the family was simply busy with their daily activities. The front door was locked, and despite knocking, no one responded. Phone calls also went unanswered. Through the curtained windows, it was impossible to determine if anyone was inside or what was happening. Although the situation was extremely unusual, no one was eager to contact the police. Instead, a community elder was called, and they advised searching for a spare key to let themselves in. An hour and a half later, community members finally entered the house and discovered an unsettling scene. Everything inside was in order, with no signs of intrusion, but the owners were missing. The scene seemed normal until they entered the master bedroom, where they found the pastor's lifeless body lying on the floor in a pool of blood. A massive gunshot wound in his back had caused blood to spatter everywhere, and dried blood foam covered his face. The body had already gone cold and stiff, indicating that Matthew had likely been killed that morning, as he was still dressed in his pajamas. The police conducted a forensic examination of the body and determined that the pastor was killed by a single shot to the back from a large caliber weapon. He died shortly after being wounded due to massive blood loss and was unable to call for help. It was impossible to establish whether any strangers were in the house at the time of the murder, as the people who arrived before the police had destroyed all evidence. The crime scene was unusual, and those who could provide information about what happened had disappeared. The fate of the pastor's wife and daughters remained unknown. The police suspected that they might have been kidnapped or also killed. In addition, the family minivan, a Winkler, was missing from the garage. A massive search was launched, and the state issued a yellow alert, which meant that children were missing. All citizens were asked to be vigilant and assist in the search. Matthew Brian Winkler was born on November 21, 1974, in Henderson, Tennessee, a picturesque country town. As the youngest of 3 sons, he grew up with his brothers James and Daniel in a conservative Christian family. Their parents, Dan and Diane Winkler, were very religious and raised their sons in a strict and obedient environment. Notably, Matthew followed in the footsteps of his ancestors, becoming a minister in the 5th generation. His father, great-uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler, and great-great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr. were all preachers of the gospel at some point. His father, who ran the local preacher's school, was a respected and influential figure in their hometown. The Winkler brothers attended Sunday school and actively participated in church activities during their younger years. In high school, Matthew showed a serious interest in soccer, and everyone who saw him play noted his talent, predicting he could become an outstanding athlete of world renown. However, he later decided to sacrifice a promising sports career in favor of Bible study and church ministry. After completing school, Matthew's family lived in Austin, a small city in Texas. Although he was a creative person with a strong charisma, he did not have any exceptional academic achievements to his credit. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in Freed-Hardeman College and completed his studies successfully. While pursuing his college education, Matthew also started his ministerial career under his father's guidance. He served as the youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. Later, he was appointed to the preaching position at the 4th Street Church of Christ in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carol Winkler was born in 1973 in Tennessee to a deeply religious family. Her sister Patricia, born premature, suffered from cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and mental retardation. Despite her condition, Mary was very close to Patricia, caring for her with kindness. Tragedy struck in 1987 when Patricia died in a bathtub after an epileptic seizure. Mary was devastated, blaming herself for not being there to prevent it. Teachers were concerned about Mary's well-being due to her deplorable state, so they sent her to see the school psychologist, who provided her with help. However, when her father found out, he caused a scene and prohibited his daughter from continuing the sessions, insisting that family issues should only be discussed within the family. In reality, Mary never received genuine emotional support from her parents. As a result, Mary grew up to be modest and extremely shy, always trying to avoid conflicts. After the tragic death of her little sister, Mary became withdrawn. Because her father refused to let her seek professional help, the unresolved trauma accumulated over the years, ultimately leading to severe psychological problems. Following Patricia's death, Mary's parents decided to adopt Charlotte, a young girl from a troubled and large family. Soon, they were also granted custody of Charlotte's 2 brothers and sister, and the siblings were reunited in their new home. Mary, once again, took on the role of the older sister, caring for the younger children and assisting her mother. Matthew and Mary Winkler met shortly after Matthew's high school graduation. Despite his popularity among girls due to his athletic build and handsome features, Matthew's strict religious upbringing kept him from getting too caught up in romantic entanglements. They quickly developed a strong connection, which soon blossomed into a deep love for each other. This was the first intense emotional experience for both of them, and after a few months, they introduced each other to their parents. With their parents' blessing, they began making wedding plans. They tied the knot in April 1994. When their first child, Patricia, was born, Matthew was still in college and had to take a temporary break from his studies. He got a job at a construction site, but didn't last long due to his inability to cope with the physical demands. During this period, Matthew's volatile personality began to emerge. He would often get irritable and angry over small things, and sometimes struggled to control his temper. However, Mary chose not to complain or share their family issues with others. As a meek and obedient young woman, raised in a patriarchal environment, she followed her husband's lead in every aspect. At first, Mary's family lived close to her parents' house, allowing her to visit them often. However, Mrs. Freeman, Mary's mother, was soon diagnosed with cancer, which progressed rapidly and took her life within a few months. This was another devastating blow for Mary, who was left to care for her younger siblings. To make matters worse, Mary was pregnant again at the time. Shortly after giving birth to her second daughter, the family relocated to a new city, where they purchased a small house of their own. After the move, Mary became fully devoted to caring for her newborn, and as a result, her relationships with her father and younger siblings began to deteriorate as they required constant attention. Furthermore, Mary struggled with severe postpartum depression. Everyone familiar with the Winkler family noticed Mary's peculiarities. She was introverted and even socially anxious, avoiding interaction with others. Forming new connections, let alone friendships, was a struggle for her. Her mood would shift frequently, and she was prone to melancholy, with even the smallest thing capable of moving her to tears. As Matthew's pastor career advanced, Mary became increasingly withdrawn. The situation grew more complicated when she became pregnant again, only to learn months later that the fetus had died. This devastating news deeply disturbed Mary, who had been eagerly anticipating the child and dreaming of a large, loving family. It took 2 years for her to see the long-awaited positive pregnancy test, and her joy was overwhelming. However, this time around, Mary concealed her pregnancy for a long time, as if fearful of something. Mrs. Winkler's strange behavior stemmed from childhood trauma and an unhealthy upbringing. Her husband, the family head, was authoritarian, demanding obedience. Behind the facade of a perfect couple, he was violent, often yelling at her without reason. The rumors of the pastor's cruelty spread after Mary appeared with a black eye. Matthew's urge for role-playing and adult toys clashed with Mary's conservative upbringing. She resisted, enraging him, and he tried to force his desires. After abuse, Mary confided in a friend who betrayed her trust, fueling rumors about the clergyman's behavior. Matthew was denied a church leadership promotion and forced to step down from teaching Sunday school due to unfavorable rumors about his personal preferences. His family had to relocate to a new city, where they started fresh. In Selmer, Matthew became a pastor again and his wife took a part-time job. Despite challenges, they earned the admiration and respect of their community, seen as an exemplary couple and model family. The Winkler family and their neighbors became close friends, often visiting and sharing holidays. Months before the tragedy, Mary bragged about her husband buying a gun for self-defense and taking her to the shooting range. She learned quickly and accurately hit targets. It came out that the Winklers already had guns at home, bought by the pastor for self-defense, which puzzled the guests since they lived in a peaceful town with no enemies. After another move, the couple's financial situation became precarious. Mary sought out various part-time jobs and decided to pursue a medical degree, aiming to work in a clinic and help children in need. However, she soon turned to financial fraud to improve their family's financial standing. Mary later claimed she didn't realize her actions were illegal and intended to pay back the money once she got back on her feet. What Mary did is commonly known as artificially inflating account balances. She received checks from unknown sources, deposited them into a joint bank account with her husband, and then changed the account address so that all communications would be sent there. The total amount of checks received was nearly $177,000, which raised suspicions among bank employees. They invited the couple to the bank branch to clarify the situation, but the Winklers never showed up, further fueling suspicion. Although it was assumed that Matthew was unaware of his wife's actions after his death, Mary tried to convince the court that the fraud was his idea and that he had forced her to make shady transactions while he remained in the background to avoid detection. Mary's disappearance sparks suspicion. Her family's in danger after her husband's murder, and she's initially seen as a victim. But after neighbors' accounts and fraud evidence, she becomes the prime suspect. Authorities must find her, her kids, and the family car to ensure their safety. They're tracing her bank transactions and cell phone signal. Mary was discovered the following day in an Alabama resort town, where she was enjoying quality time with her children at a local amusement park. Apparently, she had planned a special day for them, aware that her impending imprisonment would separate her from her daughters for an extended period. Upon being taken to the police station to provide statements, they recounted a consistent and confident narrative. They claimed that intruders had broken into their home, assaulting their father, and their mother had armed herself to protect them. According to the girls, they were then forced to flee for their safety. Their father was still alive and in the hospital, and they were about to visit him. However, Patricia and Maria Eliza did not witness the events that unfolded in the house. All they knew was that they heard a gunshot, caught a glimpse of their father lying on the floor, and then their mother quickly got them into the car and they drove away. Mary soon began to confess, but claimed she couldn't recall the exact sequence of events due to a temporary memory lapse. According to her, her husband had been abusing her for years, humiliating her and pressuring her into intimate acts that went against her wishes. Mary maintained that it was he who had initiated the financial fraud she had committed. Matthew was known for demanding absolute obedience, had a short temper, and had a history of physical violence, as confirmed by his secretary at his previous job. The woman had frequently witnessed the pastor belittle his wife, who would carefully bring him lunch to church, only to be met with dissatisfaction. The evening before the tragic event, a scandal erupted in the family, prompting the couple to sleep in separate rooms. Mary was distraught, crying throughout the night, and in the morning, she found herself holding a loaded shotgun, which her husband habitually kept at the ready. She entered Matthew's room, where she shot him in the back while he lay in bed. Matthew collapsed to the floor, bloodied foam emanating from his mouth and nose. According to Mary, as her husband lay dying, he whispered, "Why?" To which she responded, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Mary then gathered her daughters and fled the house, leaving her husband, who, as experts later determined, tried to reach for the phone to call for help, but lacked the strength to do so. The murder weapon was later discovered in the trunk of the car in which Mary escaped with the children. However, at the trial, Mary was unable to explain why she had taken the gun with her. The role-playing costumes found in their home were presented as evidence of the pastor's emotional abuse and humiliation of his wife. When Mary saw them, she turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite her inconsistent testimony, the court ultimately believed that Mary Winkler was the victim of domestic abuse and that the murder was a culmination of years of anger, resentment, and pain. However, this did not excuse her from taking responsibility for her actions. In April 2007, the court finally delivered its verdict in this complex case. Mary was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but the sentence sparked controversy due to her questionable mental state. Initially, she was expected to serve at least 6 years in prison, but ultimately received a sentence of less than a year. During her sentence, she spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital, where doctors assessed her ability to regain custody of her children. Upon her release in the summer of 2008, Mary was granted sole custody of her daughters, who had been living with their paternal grandparents. Matthew's parents were outraged, believing that Mary had deliberately killed their son and received a lenient sentence. They felt she should not have been given custody of the girls, but all their attempts to appeal the decision failed. The fraud case was never brought to trial because the bank failed to file formal charges, and as a result, the matter was completely dropped. The case of Lisa Harnum. Lisa Cecilia Harnum was born on June 12, 1981, in the Toronto suburbs of Canada as the second child in her family. She was raised alongside her older brother Jason, with whom she has always been very close. Their single mother, Joanna, brought them up independently. Since their father left the family when they were very young and played no further role in their lives, Lisa and her brother had no memories of him. From an early age, Lisa grew up to be an active and purposeful girl. She participated in sports with her brother, attended martial arts classes, and enjoyed playing soccer and volleyball. However, her true passion was ballet, which she practiced at the dance studio for several hours daily. As a tall and slender child, Lisa's professional ballet training required a strict diet, which unfortunately had a detrimental effect on her growing body. During adolescence, Lisa developed anorexia as a result of her eating disorders. For a long time, she kept her problem hidden, believing she could overcome it alone. However, when her weight dropped to critically low levels, her mother intervened and had Lisa hospitalized for several months to recover and gain weight. After graduating, she pursued dancing classes and decided to enter the beauty industry. Alongside her university studies, she worked as a perfumer at a large cosmetics chain store, and in her free time, studied makeup and hairdressing techniques. When she turned 24, Lisa moved to Australia in 2005, driven by a desire for drastic change. She wanted to escape to a warmer climate and explore the world. On a one-year work visa, Lisa traveled to another continent. Her mother, Joanna, accompanied her for the first few months to ensure a smooth transition. Once satisfied that her daughter was settled, Joanna returned to Toronto, confident that Lisa could take care of herself. Lisa settled in Sydney, renting a cozy apartment, and soon landed a job at a small local cosmetology company. Once her visa expired, she made the decision to make Australia her permanent home. To achieve this, she first extended her stay for another year, and then began preparing the necessary documents required to obtain Australian citizenship. Lisa faced challenges in her personal life, partly due to her preference for older men, possibly stemming from her absent father figure. In 2006, she started a romance with a coworker nearly twice her age at Sydney Cosmetics. They moved in together, and her family approved. They traveled extensively, but eventually broke up a year after their engagement, with the age difference likely a factor. In 2010, Lisa graduated from the Sydney College of Stylists and landed a job as a hairdresser at a popular beauty salon, where she swiftly earned the respect of her colleagues and the trust of her clients. Around the same time, she started dating a new boyfriend, but their romance was short-lived after Lisa discovered he was married. Refusing to get involved in destroying someone else's family, she ended the relationship promptly. Before that, at a party, her boyfriend had introduced her to his friend, Simon Gitney, a businessman. This chance encounter would ultimately prove disastrous for Lisa. Born in December 1973 in Maryland, Simon Gitney came from a large, religious family of Lebanese immigrants. Raised alongside 5 siblings in a strict, obedient household, Simon struggled to control his emotions and anger from a young age. He was possessive, intolerant of rejection, and prone to violent outbursts, which eventually led to serious legal troubles. At 18, Simon Gitney was first incarcerated for harassing his ex-girlfriend at her workplace. The store owner intervened, but Simon returned with friends, assaulted the owner, and was subsequently arrested. Due to good behavior, he only served a few months before being released on bail. 3 years later, Simon was arrested again, this time for theft. He resisted arrest, engaged in a violent struggle, and bit off a policeman's earlobe. Although he faced a severe prison sentence, the pastor of the Lebanese Christian church, which his family belonged to, intervened on his behalf. As a result, Simon served only a year and a half in prison. In 2000, Simon was arrested for drugs. He served 2 years of a 4-year sentence. After his release, Simon transformed his life. He co-founded a luxury shoe business, invested in real estate and a premium car, and hid his criminal past from others. Simon and Lisa exchanged numbers at a party and started chatting. When Lisa complained about her living situation, Simon offered her a free room in his apartment while she looked for a new place. Despite her mom's concerns, Lisa moved in, thinking Simon might be gay due to his appearance and piercings. They lived separately for months, but grew closer over time, and a romance blossomed. Simon, 37, and Lisa, 28, were a couple. To Lisa, Simon seemed like a charming prince from a fairy tale. He was outgoing, cheerful, and lavished his love with gifts and surprises. They went everywhere together, including the elite sports club, which Simon had been attending for years. Lisa thought she had found her soulmate and would live happily ever after with him. She couldn't stop talking about him to her mom, brother, and friends, unaware that their fairy tale was about to come to an end. Simon's behavior changed 6 months in, but Lisa didn't notice. He distanced her from friends and family, erased her boundaries, and tried to control her views and tastes. He convinced her to quit her job at a beauty salon where she was happy by throwing a scene and forcing her resignation. A month and a half after that, the couple relocated to a luxurious 15th-floor apartment in an elite residential complex. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the apartment was heavily equipped with hidden surveillance cameras. Simon gifted Lisa an expensive smartphone and laptop, pre-installed with spyware that enabled him to monitor her messages, emails, and calls, as well as track her every move. He also gained access to her social media accounts, giving him the power to delete friends, posts, and photos at will. Catani's control over Lisa's life intensified daily, but he cleverly made it seem as though Lisa was voluntarily complying with his demands. He had invaded every aspect of her life, eliminating any semblance of privacy. Catani dictated Lisa's appearance, forbidding her from wearing makeup, claiming it made her look tacky, and instead bought her dull gray and black clothing, discarding her old outfits as too revealing. He restricted her movements, only allowing her to leave the apartment accompanied by him, and solely visiting places of his choice. He even banned her from going to the gym, instead purchasing expensive exercise machines, citing that she could now work out from home. Lisa's social media friend lists were shrinking daily, and Ghani finally convinced her to delete her accounts. With no friends left in real life, all her contacts and calls were closely monitored by Simon, who only allowed her to communicate with her mother and brother. During her last visit home in December 2010, Lisa decided to fly to Canada to spend Christmas with her family. Simon had planned to accompany her, but his urgent business matters prevented him from doing so. Despite initial reservations, he eventually agreed to let her travel alone, provided she adhered to his strict rules and conditions. When Lisa arrived, Jason and Joanna were astonished by the drastic changes they saw in her. She was a shadow of her former bright and cheerful self, now devoid of makeup, with her luxurious hair hidden under a headdress and dressed in unflattering all-black attire. However, it was the internal changes that were truly alarming. Lisa would flinch at every phone ring, instantly grabbing the receiver, as per Simon's instruction to answer calls immediately, regardless of the time or her activities. During her stay at her mother's house, Lisa refused to see friends and rarely ventured out. Joanna was shocked by her daughter Lisa's behavior and decided to talk to her. Lisa broke down, revealing that Simon controls her life, tracking her every move and restricting her freedom. He doesn't let her work, see friends, or pursue hobbies. Joanna was horrified, urging Lisa to stay in Canada, but Lisa insisted she loved Simon and believed he'd eventually calm down. Despite her family's pleas to stay, Lisa decided to move back to Australia to be with Simon, disregarding their warnings that the relationship was unhealthy. She reassured her mother that everything would be fine, saying Simon loved her and wouldn't harm her. However, after her return, the situation deteriorated significantly. Simon restricted her from leaving the apartment, and when they went out together, he demanded that she keep her eyes fixed on her feet, avoiding eye contact with other men. Moreover, he started calling her Cecilia, her second name, as he believed it was more respectable. In the spring of 2011, Lisa started complaining about pain in her leg, an old injury from her youth when she took ballet classes. Instead of taking her to the hospital, Ghani hired a female physical therapist to give Lisa massages 3 times a week at their home. The therapist soon became Lisa's closest friend and confidant, and Lisa openly shared her concerns about her difficult situation with her. On June 12th, Simon organized a birthday party for Lisa at the most expensive restaurant in Sydney, but the guest list only included his relatives and close friends. Lisa wasn't allowed to invite anyone she wanted, making it an isolating celebration. At the end of the evening, Simon proposed to Lisa by putting a ring on her finger. She accepted, but her tears were not of happiness. Instead, they were tears of desperation and hopelessness, noticeable to everyone present. Back home, Lisa called her mother and tearfully shared the news of her engagement. However, her mother, Joanna, was not pleased with the announcement. She tried to convince Lisa to end the relationship and return to Canada as soon as possible. Lisa asked her mother to avoid discussing this over the phone, as she had already realized that her fiancé, Simon, was eavesdropping on their conversations. Lisa attempted to focus on the upcoming wedding and started making plans. When she tried to discuss the details with Simon, he curtly dismissed her, informing her that he would select the venue, choose her dress, and create the guest list. Lisa felt utterly powerless, having no say in the matter. During a subsequent physiotherapy session, Lisa confessed that she couldn't continue like this, but felt trapped because Simon refused to let her go. The physiotherapist and Lisa devised a plan. At each session, Lisa would secretly pass some of her belongings to the therapist for safekeeping, all while ensuring Simon remained unaware of her actions. On July 28th, Simon rushed out of the house, leaving his laptop behind, which was unusual for him since he always carried it with him. Lisa seized the opportunity to investigate, and her worst suspicions were confirmed. She discovered a spyware program on the laptop, which Simon had used to obtain all her phone data and recordings of her conversations with her mother. Even more disturbingly, she found surveillance footage from the security cameras installed in every room of their apartment. On the same day, Lisa used her physical therapist's phone to call her mother and begged her to take the next available flight to come and rescue her from the apartment. However, Joanna couldn't drop everything immediately. She needed time to arrange a shift swap with a colleague. In hindsight, Joanna would always regret this delay. Back home, Simon quickly realized that his fiancée had discovered the spyware on his laptop. Lisa broke down in tears, trying to understand why Simon would do such a thing, but he justified his actions by claiming they were for her own good. On July 29th, an intense conversation took place between the young couple, a recording of which would later be presented in court. Lisa was overcome with emotion and asked to leave, but Simon remained calm and assured her that this would never happen, suggesting that she was suffering from mental health issues. On the morning of July 30th, 2011, Lisa woke up early, got dressed, and gathered her important documents and belongings in her purse. She locked herself in the bathroom and made a final phone call to her mother, warning her that if anything bad happened to her, it would be Simon's fault. It seemed Lisa was attempting to sneak out of the apartment while Simon slept, but unfortunately she was unsuccessful. What happened next is unclear, but according to neighbors, they heard a scream in the hallway. However, before they could react, the noise abruptly stopped, and exactly a minute later, a young woman fell to her death from the 15th floor balcony. Passers-by on the street also heard the scream and saw the body falling from a great height, but they didn't have time to understand what was happening. A man walking his dog that morning, who was closest to the scene, heard a noise and looked up. He saw a man holding something large, which he then threw down. When people arrived at the scene, they found a young woman lying on the ground, but despite their efforts, they couldn't help her. She died instantly, having suffered severe injuries. 3 minutes later, Ghani, still in his pajamas, ran out into the street, crying and saying he didn't know how he was going to live without his fiancée, claiming he hadn't caught her in time. At first, it seemed like an accident, but Ghani quickly claimed that his fiancée had intentionally ended her life. A note found in his pocket and a disturbing video suggested that something strange was going on. After the body was taken to the morgue and examined, a torn note was found in different pockets with the message, "There are cameras everywhere in the apartment." It's likely Lisa was afraid Simon would discover the note, so she ripped it into small pieces and scattered them among her pockets. An investigation revealed that indeed, multiple cameras were installed in the apartment, but the hard drive containing the recordings was nowhere to be found. Simon claimed that there were no video recordings at all. However, a surveillance camera in the communal hallway caught a disturbing scene. The short footage shows Lisa fleeing the apartment and calling for help, but Simon grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and drags her back inside. This incident occurred just a minute before she fell off the balcony, and it was the scream that the neighbors heard. Ghani's laptop contained a recording of a conversation between Ghani and Lisa from the night before the tragedy, as well as spyware that Simon used to monitor his fiancée's activities. Simon claimed that he and Lisa had an argument that morning, during which she became hysterical and ran out into the hallway, screaming. He said he managed to bring her back inside because he didn't want to attract the attention of their neighbors. According to Simon, he then tried to call Lisa's mother, but she ran out to the balcony and jumped to her death just as he was doing so. Simon admitted that Lisa had previously threatened to take her own life, but he hadn't taken her warning seriously. Meanwhile, Ghani attributed the spyware on his laptop to Simon's supposed concern for Lisa's safety. During the trial, Simon was accompanied by Rachel Louise, a 22-year-old model who bore a striking resemblance to his late fiancé. However, it was later alleged that Rachel Louise was only using Simon to gain fame and attention, and that she willingly spoke to the press and appeared on TV to declare that Simon was incapable of harming a woman. Simon's lawyers attempted to persuade the court that Lisa was unstable, prone to outbursts, and potentially responsible for her own death, despite evidence of her long battle with anorexia and her treatment at a clinic. They also claimed that Simon, being shorter, would have been physically incapable of lifting Lisa, who was taller, or throwing her over the balcony. However, a gym trainer, who regularly saw Simon, testified that he was much stronger than he appeared and could easily have lifted Lisa, contradicting the defense's claims. This was further supported by the absence of Lisa's fingerprints on the railing and glass barrier, which suggested she could not have jumped without touching them. Additionally, the physiotherapist who had been confided in by Lisa and received her belongings in the hope of escaping her abusive relationship testified in court, providing crucial evidence. In the end, Ghani was found guilty of murdering his fiancée and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. After the verdict was announced, Rachel Louise became enraged and started insulting the judge, which led to her removal from the courtroom. Simon and his legal team attempted to appeal the court's decision, but all their efforts were unsuccessful, and the verdict stood. Following the verdict, Rachel ended her relationship with her boyfriend, citing in an interview that it was challenging to maintain a relationship while he was incarcerated, although she still believes he is innocent. The case of Soraya Sierra. Soraya Sierra was born on November 9, 1979, in New York, the second of 3 children in a large family. She grew up with her older brother David and younger sister Christina. Her parents, Dennis and Bethany Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican descent and had immigrated to the United States in 1973, settling in Manhattan, where their children were born. After moving, the couple joined a local Protestant community and converted to evangelical Christianity. They raised their children in a strict environment, adhering to the religious principles of their adopted faith. The family was regular churchgoers, socialized with other community members, and the children attended Sunday school. Soraya was an active and creative person who stood out for her strong will and complex personality. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, obedient, and modest, Soraya was seen as a rebellious and mischievous individual. However, she still respected her parents and acknowledged their authority. In the Jimenez household, there were strict rules that everyone followed. These rules governed daily routines, everyday moments, and behavioral norms. For instance, the daughters were not allowed to interact with boys, go on dates, or stay out past 9 p.m. All their friendships were monitored, and their parents always knew who they were with and where. As a result, Soraya's life revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle was limited to people she met in those places. Soraya, active, energetic, socially oriented girl, was bored and cramped within the framework in which she was kept, but her parents were sure that they were doing the right thing for the good of their children. During her school years, Soraya planned to enter a pedagogical university and become a teacher in the field of culture or arts. But closer to the end of her studies, she became interested in psychology and began to think about connecting her future profession with this field of activity. At a religious community meeting, a young woman named Soraya caught the eye of Stephen Sierra, a man 7 years her senior. He was the first to approach her, finding an excuse to chat. Soraya was just 18 at the time, and with her parents' approval, the two started dating. Stephen made a good impression on Dennis and Bethley, who thought he was a decent, polite, and honest suitor for their daughter. Though Soraya wasn't deeply in love with Stephen, she agreed to marry him, largely to gain independence from her parents' household and strict control. Despite having a good relationship with her parents, Soraya yearned for the freedom to make her own choices and shape her own future. Less than a year after they met, Soraya and Stephen got married in February 1999. At the time, Soraya was 19 years old and Stephen was 26. After the wedding, they moved to Michigan, where Stephen's parents lived. This was a big change for Soraya, who had spent most of her life in her native New York. The new surroundings seemed to invigorate her, and she threw herself into making their new house a home, enjoying new friendships, and exploring the local area. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office and started thinking about pursuing a college degree. Soraya soon became pregnant and gave birth to 2 children, a boy and a girl. As a result, she had to put her plans to attend university on hold, as she was fully devoted to motherhood and found joy in it. A couple of years later, the Sierra family, now with 2 young children, made another move, this time to sunny California, where they settled in the charming Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles. There, Stephen was offered a job opportunity. However, it soon became clear that his earnings were insufficient to support their lifestyle. After discussing their situation, they decided to return to New York, eventually settling into a modest rented apartment located near the home of the Jimenez family. At that time, the couple, Soraya and her husband, were struggling with serious financial issues. With Soraya staying at home to take care of the children, her husband had to make do with irregular income, which led to periodic debt. However, things started to look up when the children began attending school, and Soraya landed a job at an advertising agency. Around the same time, Stephen found a stable job as a bus driver on one of the city routes. In her late 20s, with the children grown and their lives stable, Soraya revived her long-held plans to pursue higher education. Unlike her earlier interest in pedagogy, she now opted for the psychology faculty at a local university. However, Soraya soon lost enthusiasm for her studies, finding the lengthy lectures dull and uninspiring. She decided to explore alternative fields, seeking a profession that would excite, inspire, and allow her to express herself. Since Soraya was a creative person with a talent for drawing and finding beauty everywhere, she became fascinated with photography. She joined a renowned New York photography community to develop her skills, and it soon became apparent that she had a real gift. Her ability to select the perfect angles and craft harmonious compositions produced stunning, beautiful shots. Even professionals praised her work for its creativity and vision. On the advice of her colleagues, Soraya created a social media page in early 2012, where she began posting her work. It didn't take long for her to gain a massive following, with thousands of users subscribing to her profile and enthusiastically commenting on each piece. In just a few months, she became a star, and her subscriber count continued to grow exponentially. The sudden fame left her feeling dizzy. Soraya felt a strong desire to achieve more and improve her skills, so she proposed organizing a group photo tour to search for unique and breathtaking locations around the world. Soraya Sierra began by taking short trips within her native country, where she developed a specialty in capturing architectural ensembles and historical monuments through her lens. Her photographs garnered great success, which fueled her desire to explore further. She set her sights on Istanbul, one of the world's most ancient and beautiful cities, intent on photographing its iconic landmarks and historical sites. Although her parents were hesitant about her traveling abroad for the first time, Soraya was resolute. They were concerned about her venturing out alone, away from home for an extended period. To alleviate their worries, Soraya agreed to be accompanied by her close friend, Magdalena. However, what her family didn't know was that they were going through a tumultuous time, and Soraya's relationship with her husband was on the brink of collapse. It's possible that her desire to embark on a photography tour on the other side of the world was, in part, a coping mechanism. She yearned to escape her situation, gain a fresh perspective, and reflect on her family's troubles from a distance. After feeling confined for too long, Soraya felt an overwhelming need to break free and do something that nourished her soul during that difficult period. Soraya's relatives were worried that she would be traveling by herself to a foreign country on the other side of the ocean. But she calmed their fears by promising to keep in touch daily through phone calls, letters, and photos. Besides, Soraya had already lined up commercial photography projects in Germany and Austria, which were part of her meticulously planned itinerary. In fact, her whole trip was carefully timetabled, with every hour accounted for, leaving no room for spontaneity or changes. On January 7, 2013, Soraya boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul with limited cash, a smartphone, a tablet, and a DSLR camera with professional lenses. After arriving, she called her family to let them know she had landed safely and was heading to check into a budget hotel she had booked in advance, located in a remote and apparently unsafe area. It later emerged that Soraya was not alone in Istanbul. She was accompanied by a young man named Taylan, whom she had met on social networks in mid-2012. Taylan was the one who had persuaded her to fly to Turkey for several months. During this time, they had been in close contact and had developed a strong bond. Soraya had complete faith in her new friend, and they spent almost every day together, exploring the city's attractions. As a native of Istanbul, Taylan was intimately familiar with the city and organized exciting trips to the most interesting and sometimes unusual places. After Turkey, Soraya traveled to Europe for commercial photo shoots, staying with longtime subscribers to save on hotels. In Vienna, she met a young man who shared her passion for photography and hosted her for 2 days. The trip went as planned, with Soraya visiting each destination and meeting everyone on her schedule. On January 21st, 2013, Soraya finished her photo tour and called her parents and husband to let them know her flight details for New York. As she had never spent so much time away from home before, everyone was relieved her trip was ending. However, before departing, Soraya decided to take a final stroll around the city to capture some last-minute photos for her account. When Soraya's father arrived at the airport to pick her up, she was nowhere to be found among the passengers. Her phone was also unreachable, and all attempts to contact her failed. Concerned, her father approached the airline representatives, who informed him that no passenger by her name was on the flight. Soraya's husband, Stephen, immediately contacted her Istanbul hotel, where he was told that her belongings remained in the room and she hadn't checked out, despite being due to do so the previous day. She was also absent from the hotel for the second day. This news sparked panic among the family, who were left wondering where Soraya was and what to do next. Stephen decided to investigate his wife's accounts, and what he found shocked him: a suspicious correspondence with a man named Taylan. Despite his reservations, Stephen opted to reach out to Taylan directly to get to the bottom of things. Taylan claimed to have seen the missing woman just a day before she was supposed to depart, and surprisingly, she hadn't even bothered to call him beforehand, despite her earlier promise. Soraya's family promptly notified the American embassy in Turkey about the incident, and a large-scale search operation was launched the following day. A special unit was formed to handle the operation. Soraya's husband and parents flew to Istanbul soon after, deciding to personally oversee the search efforts, given the short time that had passed since her disappearance and the high likelihood of finding her alive. The police investigation began by looking into Soraya's social circle and speaking with people who had seen her shortly before she vanished. The hotel staff where she stayed, including her friend Taylan, were questioned. The hotel manager reported that he last saw Soraya the night before she disappeared, when she left with a small bag and a camera. She was supposed to check out later, but never returned to the hotel. The next morning, The hotel received a call from her worried husband, who informed them that Soraya's belongings and documents were still at the hotel. The receptionist also described the clothes Soraya was wearing on the day she went missing. Taran introduced himself as Tyron, but his true identity was later revealed. He declined to explain the alias, and it was discovered he'd been in close contact with Soraya for months, even inviting her to Istanbul. Despite this, Taran denied a romantic relationship, claiming they were just friends. The investigation retraced Soraya's steps via cell phone data and CCTV footage. She took the subway to Sultanahmet, visited the promontory, and then went to Eminönü Market, getting lost in the crowd. She reappeared on the subway, heading to Hagia Sophia, but soon vanished again, sparking concern. The search team decided to investigate the Hagia Sophia ruins, hoping to find someone who had seen a lone woman with a camera. After several hours of searching, they finally found a body, but it wasn't the outcome they had hoped for. Near the ancient Constantinople walls, they discovered the lifeless body of a young woman, covered with an old, dirty blanket that had hidden it from view. The investigators suspected that Soraya had been brought to this location, wrapped in that blanket. Forensic experts estimated that the body had been there for 10 to 12 days before its discovery. The lower part of the body was found unclothed, suggesting an act of violence, which was later confirmed by the experts. The autopsy revealed that Soraya had died from a severe blow to the head with a heavy, blunt object. Additionally, her body showed multiple bruises and 2 broken ribs. Pathologists also found skin particles and blood under Soraya's fingernails, indicating that she had fought back and scratched her attacker. The crime scene was both strange and absurd because, despite the thief stealing the victim's bag, smartphone, and camera, they left her gold earrings, wedding ring, and expensive watch, which immediately drew attention. The only lead from the area's camera footage was a young woman resembling Soraya filming something on her phone, followed by a man who either hit or pushed her, and then both disappeared from view. The attacker's identity remained unknown. Media leaks spark scandal concerns. Investigators stay mum as bodies found, adding to mystery. Questions emerge. Why did the young married woman travel solo to Istanbul? How did she fund it? Initially, suspects included a lover and another acquaintance, but both deny involvement. Later, it emerged that the Viennese man who had given Soraya shelter had a criminal past, sparking speculation that he might have exploited the American as a drug mule. However, a thorough investigation disproved this theory. There were also whispers that Soraya could have been secretly working for U.S. intelligence, gathering intel in other countries, but this possibility was deemed unlikely. With a warrant in hand, police searched Talsali's home, collecting a DNA sample that matched the skin particles and seminal fluid found on the victim's body, confirming his guilt. Furthermore, the victim's phone was last active in the same neighborhood where Talsali lived. When the authorities discovered that the criminal had escaped to Syria, they lost all hope of capturing him. However, they received an unexpected surprise when Talsali was arrested while attempting to illegally cross the border back into Turkey. After joining the Syrian rebels and acquiring weapons, he was injured in the conflict and decided it would be safer to return home. In the end, he was caught trying to bring his weapon back with him, which led to his initial arrest. When Talsali was questioned, he gave a disturbingly detailed account of what happened. He claimed to have been on a hiking trail along the walls of Şebeku when he saw a young woman, Soraya, taking pictures. He admired her from a distance for a few minutes, then approached her. Despite the language barrier, he tried to communicate with her using gestures but failed to understand what she wanted. What caught his attention, however, was her brand new iPhone and expensive camera. As Soraya walked away, Talsali followed her, intent on robbing her. With night falling and no one else in sight, he saw an opportunity. When Soraya turned around and took a picture of him, Talsali became enraged and attacked her, hitting her on the head with a boulder. The two of them rolled down the wall, causing Soraya severe injuries, including bruises and broken ribs. After rendering Soraya unconscious, Tal Sali committed violent and intimate acts against her. He then delivered another severe blow to her head to kill her. Tal Sali stole Soraya's bag, camera, and phone and left the scene. On his way, he found a discarded blanket and returned to cover Soraya's body with it. By then, it was dark, and the chances of running into someone at the wall were minimal. Once he returned, he dragged the body to the side, positioning it so it wouldn't be visible from the nearby hiking path. He then covered it with a blanket and left the scene. During the search for the American woman, the perpetrator surprisingly revisited the crime scene to ensure she was dead and that her body remained where he had left it. When Tal Sali found out through the news that his victim's body had been discovered, he realized the police would soon be on his tail. So he decided to flee the country, borrowing money from his sister, who had always felt sorry for him. Incidentally, he was unable to benefit from the stolen goods, as the camera was damaged during the fall, and the smartphone was locked with a password he couldn't crack. As a result, he discarded the stolen items, including the signal, when he went on the run. The defendant showed no remorse, and DNA evidence placed him at the crime scene. Skin under the victim's nails, seminal fluid on her body. His phone was last used near his home, and a video recording caught the attack. After all the evidence was presented, the decision was made to conduct a psychiatric examination, driven by the suspicion that Tal Sali might be insane, given the disturbing nature of his actions, behavior, and the unsettling calmness with which he graphically described the atrocities he had perpetrated. Nevertheless, the experts ultimately concluded that he was of sound mind and fully cognizant of his actions when he attacked his victim in the summer of 2014. Judge Ely delivered the final verdict, finding Tal Sali guilty on all counts and sentencing him to life imprisonment. Soraya's relatives considered this decision fair and just. Following the necessary expert examinations, the body of the murdered American woman was transported back to her homeland in New York, with all related costs borne by Turkish Airlines. Soraya was laid to rest in a ceremony that respected all religious rites and traditions. Soraya's family created a memorial website in her honor, where they published her previously unseen works. The photos proved to be extremely popular, attracting buyers from all over the world. The money raised from the sale of these pictures was set aside to fund college education for orphaned children. Stephen, Soraya's husband, categorically denied that his family life was in crisis, which could have led Soraya to take that fateful trip. Shortly after, Stephen grew close to a girl from the Christian community who supported him during this difficult time, often visiting his home to help with his children and household chores. Just 2 weeks before the first anniversary of Soraya's funeral, Stephen married his new partner. By the time Tal Sali was finally sentenced, Stephen was already married and preparing to become a father again. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born in New York in June 1993 to Santa and George Greenberg. As their only child, she grew up in a loving and nurturing environment. During her high school years, Ellen was a dedicated team player and demonstrated great athletic potential. She was characterized as energetic, restless, and outgoing, yet she also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduating from high school, Ellen attended Pennsylvania State University, where she earned a degree in public relations. However, she soon realized this wasn't the career path she wanted to pursue. In parallel with her job, she enrolled in a pedagogical institute's correspondence department, and a few years later, successfully defended her diploma. Ellen then relocated to Philadelphia, where she landed a job as a junior high school teacher. Ellen's life was thriving, according to her relatives. She was bursting with enthusiasm, making ambitious plans for the future, and absolutely loved her work with students. It was during this period that she met Samuel, also known as Sam Greenberg, a young man from a wealthy and prominent family in the city. Sam's parents ran a large business, and his uncle was renowned as one of the top lawyers in the state. The The two met in 2009 at a party through mutual friends and instantly clicked. Their friendly banter soon turned into a whirlwind romance, and they decided to move in together shortly after. As the clock struck 2011, on New Year's Eve, Sam proposed to Ellen, and the couple began making preparations for their spring wedding that same year. The news was met with joy from both families, and it seemed that nothing could come between the happy couple. Ellen threw herself into the delightful tasks associated with wedding planning, including drawing up guest lists, sending out invitations, choosing a venue and decorations, trying on wedding dresses, and organizing their honeymoon. Notably, Ellen took the reins on these preparations, with the groom seemingly uninvolved, although their loved ones didn't think much of it at the time. On January 26, 2011, a severe snowstorm hit the city. Ellen went to school as usual, but classes were canceled around noon due to strong winds and a blizzard, and students and teachers were sent home. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Sam. Later that day, the couple allegedly had a disagreement, which Sam initially confirmed but later denied. At around 5 p.m., Sam went to the gym in their apartment complex. When he returned, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. Sam first knocked loudly, then called out to Ellen by name, drawing the attention of their neighbors. He also tried calling her phone and sending messages, but there was no response to his knocking, calling, and yelling. However, it was clear that Ellen's phone was still inside the apartment. Sam went to the first floor of the building to ask the security guard for help. He explained the situation and asked if it was possible to open the front door, but the guard said he didn't have the authority to do so and couldn't leave his post. Sam returned to his floor, determined to take action. He used his shoulder to force open the door, managing to break the latch on the first try. As he entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific sight. Ellen was sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet door, her body brutally slashed with a knife and her clothes covered in blood. Sam immediately called emergency services, describing the scene. When asked to check Ellen's pulse, Sam hesitated, repeatedly asking if it was really necessary. Then there was a pause before he suddenly announced that there was a knife stuck in Ellen's chest, which he claimed he hadn't noticed until that moment. He concluded that Ellen was clearly already dead. The police officers who responded to the call were taken aback, having never encountered a scene like this in their extensive careers. They found the door locked from the inside with a latch, which Sam had later dislodged with his shoulder. There was no evidence of forced entry or intruders in the room. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment, and all valuables and cash remained untouched. The officers noted that nothing appeared to have been searched or disturbed. However, the most striking aspect emerged when the deceased girl's body was examined. There were no signs of struggle or attempts at self-defense, suggesting that the event occurred suddenly and the victim had no time to react. The body bore approximately 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with the fatal blow delivered to the heart, claiming Ellen's life. The investigation's gross negligence in examining the crime scene and the victim's body will be revisited later. This oversight allowed crucial evidence to go undetected, permitting a potential perpetrator to remain at large. What was even more bizarre was the police's behavior, who, even before the medical examination, seemed to think that Ellen's injuries were self-inflicted. The fact that Ellen had been experiencing panic attacks and was seeing a psychologist and was on prescription medication led them to believe that she had attempted to take her own life. Ever since she had started suffering from an anxiety disorder, Ellen had been prone to panic attacks. The situation was so severe that she had sought professional help from a psychologist. She tried not to burden her family with her concerns, and they, in turn, had attributed the changes in her behavior to pre-wedding stress and excitement. The psychologist who worked with Ellen had prescribed her 2 medications to help manage her anxiety, which she took regularly. As the psychologist would later report, neither of these medications, whether taken separately or together, could have had any adverse effect on Ellen's mental state, leading her to contemplate death. The specialist also noted that, despite her anxiety, Ellen had never had such dark thoughts. Ellen's friends and colleagues observed a change in her behavior after she moved in with Sam. She became anxious, restless, and hesitant to make decisions without consulting him. Whenever faced with a situation, Ellen would say she needed to discuss it with Sam and couldn't give an answer without his input. Ellen's parents also noticed these changes, but whenever their daughter tried to open up about her emotional struggles, she would insist that Sam was not the cause. Interestingly, 3 weeks before the tragedy, Ellen told her mother that she wanted to quit school, drop everything, and move back to her parents' house. Her mother was taken aback but reassured Ellen that she was always welcome to return home, no questions asked. However, Ellen never mentioned it again. Later, it was suggested that after the couple moved in together, Sam became violent towards his fiancée, and she lived in fear, too afraid to confide in anyone about the abuse. Although the psychologist Ellen saw did not confirm or deny this, they observed that Ellen struggled to put her feelings into words and describe what was troubling her. It seemed as though she wanted to reveal something significant, but her fear held her back. The case was plagued by inconsistencies and unanswered questions from the start. What's striking is that nobody made a serious effort to investigate these anomalies. The investigation was remarkably sloppy, with the crime scene and body examination poorly handled and expert analysis lacking. Many crucial details, facts, and evidence were disregarded and lost forever, making it impossible to reconstruct the events of the incident accurately. There were no signs of self-defense injuries on the victim's hands, suggesting that she did not try to fight back. Her body, however, showed multiple bruises. According to her fiancé, these were likely caused by her participation in team sports. Ellen's parents disputed this, stating that their daughter had not had time for sports or gym activities recently due to her busy work schedule and active wedding preparations. No suicide note was found, and Ellen's body showed signs of a brutal attack. Yet, investigators quickly suggested that she might have taken her own life. The presence of food spices and a cutting board on the kitchen table led them to theorize that Ellen had started preparing dinner, only to suddenly decide to end her life by cutting herself with a knife. However, the autopsy revealed that Ellen's body had nearly 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with 10 of them inflicted from behind. Given the severity of some of these wounds, medical experts questioned how she could have continued to move and inflict such injuries on herself, eventually stabbing herself in the heart. This raised serious doubts about the initial suicide ruling. Despite these contradictions, the investigation stuck to its original version, refusing to open a criminal case. The main reason cited was the lack of evidence of an intruder in the apartment and the absence of any signs of self-defense. Some concerns were raised about the possibility of forced entry into the apartment due to the unusual latch on the inner part of the door. This latch could be closed from the outside, but not fully. If the latch had been fully closed from the inside, it would have been impossible to break it open with a single shoulder blow without damaging the doorway. However, based on the nature of the damage, it appeared that the latch was only partially closed, which would have been possible from outside the door. Sam testified that he sought help from a security guard, who accompanied him upstairs and witnessed him kicking down a door. However, the guard disputed this, stating that he never left his post. Despite this discrepancy, the investigation did not pursue the matter, deeming it irrelevant. The investigation reviewed footage from a single surveillance camera leading to the gym, which showed Sam walking towards the gym and then returning. Although it is possible that Sam exited through another passage and returned to the gym during the intervening time, his alibi was not investigated, and potential witnesses who could confirm or deny his presence at the gym were not interviewed. Sam didn't call the police until an hour after he discovered the door was locked, and his fiancée didn't respond to his knocking and shouting. When he finally made the call, the officer who took it noticed that Sam was acting strangely, despite his frantic screams and wails. The specialist was suspicious of Sam's behavior, thinking it was an act, because although he was calm enough to answer questions, his voice wasn't shaking when asked to start administering first aid. At first, Sam questioned the need to do so, then calmed down, and finally mentioned a knife stuck in his girlfriend's chest, which he claimed not to have noticed earlier. It's worth noting that before calling the police, Sam called his parents and his lawyer uncle, who arrived at the apartment before the police and went with Sam to the station to make a statement. The next day, Sam and his uncle went back to the sealed-off apartment to collect some personal belongings, taking all of Ellen's electronic devices, 2 laptops, a phone, and a tablet. A few days after the investigation began, detectives unexpectedly decided to examine the devices in question, only to discover that the search history contained queries related to suicide. When police officers arrived at the scene, they conducted a brief investigation and hastily concluded that Ellen had committed suicide. Even when new evidence came to light, they refused to reconsider their initial ruling. The sequence of events surrounding Ellen's wounds couldn't be determined, but it was clear that the fatal blow was to the heart. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy found this unusual and decided to conduct a further investigation. He sent a sample of Ellen's spine to a specialist to determine if her spinal cord was damaged. If it was, Ellen would have been paralyzed and unable to inflict the fatal wound herself. However, the specialist suddenly changed his mind, abandoned the investigation, and claimed that the spinal cord was intact. Despite this, the report was never attached to the case files. The authorities also overlooked the fact that, despite the extensive wounds on Ellen's body, there was very little blood at the scene, suggesting that someone may have cleaned it up. No one bothered to search for potential signs of blood being washed away. The luminol that could have been used to detect blood traces was ignored. Additionally, the trash cans in the apartment were not examined, which meant that any potential evidence they may have held was lost forever. The Greenberg family broke the devastating news to Ellen's parents about their daughter's death, as they were the first to arrive at the scene. Although Ellen's family lived several hundred miles away, they rushed to the location as soon as possible. Santa and George were in shock, refusing to accept that their daughter would take her own life. However, they were left with unanswered questions about the events of that night and received only a vague conclusion with no criminal investigation. Frustrated, the Greenbergs family decided to launch their own inquiry with the help of independent experts. A private detective, intrigued by the case, offered his services for free. After reviewing the evidence, the detective concluded that Ellen's body had been moved after her death, evident from a dried blood trickle from her nose to her ear and smeared stains on the floor resembling drag marks. Furthermore, a guard recalled that Sam, who had sought help, was wearing boots, not a tracksuit as he had claimed. Despite the presentation of new evidence and witness testimony, the parents of the deceased were once again refused a criminal case or further investigation. In addition, they were refused access to case files, which included a recording of Sam's phone call to the police and surveillance footage. Years later, a young officer joined the county's homicide unit as an assistant prosecutor. Having heard about the unsolved and unusual case while studying at the university, he decided to conduct a further investigation. During his inquiry, he discovered that the injury to the back of Ellen's head suggested she may have been attacked from behind, and that there was no evidence of a spinal cord injury, contradicting the official conclusion. After re-examining the preserved spine fragment, an independent specialist concluded that the spinal cord had suffered damage in multiple areas, making it impossible for Ellen to have caused further harm to herself. Despite this, the police declined to initiate criminal proceedings. In 2018, the coroner officially ruled that all 20 wounds were self-inflicted, But Ellen's grieving parents filed a new lawsuit in 2019, alleging that the coroner and experts had not done their jobs properly. Although the lawsuit was heard and settled, the trials did not begin due to the pandemic. Ellen's family, friends, and colleagues are convinced that she could not have taken her own life, citing her aversion to the sight of blood and low pain threshold. The parents created a social media page to share official documents, new information, and alternative theories. In the summer of 2022, the case was dismissed once again, but the Greenbergs managed to transfer it to the district attorney's office, where a new prosecutor took over and reopened the investigation 11 years after the tragic events. However, to this day, the investigation remains unfinished. After the tragedy, Samuel made an effort to stay in contact with his estranged father-in-law and mother-in-law for the first year. However, he did not participate in the investigations they initiated. He refused to cooperate with the police and showed no interest in the case. He openly accepted the official account that his fiancée had inflicted the fatal injuries on herself. Samuel soon found comfort with another woman and married her just a year later. He and his new wife moved to a different state and ended all ties with the Greenberg family. Today, Samuel and his wife are raising 2 children together, and he tries to forget about his deceased ex-fiancée. The case of Carjan Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was a charismatic individual who naturally drew people's attention. One day, he caught the captivating gaze of Carjan Oviedo, a woman with a fiery passion for life and an infectious energy. They instantly connected, sharing similar interests and dreams, as well as a strong determination and entrepreneurial drive. This chance encounter led to a beautiful relationship that brought them true happiness. In 2016, the couple took the next step, moving in together and launching their own business, a warehouse, in their home. Carjan's keen eye for detail shone as she created a welcoming sign on one of the windows for customer service, alongside lists of items for sale. This was their pride and joy, a small but thriving venture. The people of Mañata watched this happy and driven couple with admiration and curiosity, wondering who they were and how they achieved so much. While many knew Carjan from her childhood, Rolando remained an enigma, with his past in Bolivia remaining a mystery to all. Rolando not only co-ran the business with Carjan, but he also worked at the Galeen Fair, where wholesale fruit sales took place. From the outside, it seemed like they had found their perfect life together, but even the strongest relationships can be put to the test. One day, Rolando was shocked to find Carjan in the car with another man. His initial reaction was anger, and in that moment, he almost destroyed the car's interior. Their picture-perfect relationship crumbled in a matter of minutes. However, Rolando decided to forgive and continue their relationship, choosing to move forward with the one he loved. To outsiders, they still appeared to be the ideal couple, capable of overcoming any obstacle together. Rolando Angel Aquino, born in 1987 in Bolivia, is an enigmatic figure. The exact date of his arrival in Argentina remains unknown, like many other aspects of his life. As the eldest of 7 children, Rolando learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from a young age. He dreamed of a happy family filled with joy and laughter. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez, with whom he had a son. Despite their difficulties, the couple remained on good terms. Later in life, Rolando had a second son, Elias, with Soledad Guardio. Although his relationships with Soledad didn't work out, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He maintained a warm relationship with the mothers of his children and stayed in touch with them. Rolando was a physically fit man who prioritized his health from a young age. He played sports and soccer for the local team to stay active. His colleagues and loved ones described him as kind, hardworking, and sociable. Although he got along well with his neighbors, Rolando had a unique charm when it came to socializing. Carjan was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Monado, where she and Rolando later set up their warehouse. The locals knew her as an outgoing and open-minded woman. Like Rolando, Karjan longed for a happy and successful family life with a loving and devoted partner. However, it took her some time to find the right person to build her happiness with. Karjan had 2 daughters from previous relationships before meeting Rolando. One of her former partners, Rule OA, was the father of one of the girls, and she married him in 2013. However, their marriage was troubled and eventually headed for a breakdown. Rule claimed that financial struggles were one of the main reasons for their conflicts. Feeling anxious about his life and seeking better opportunities, Rule left his family under the pretense of buying something essential, fleeing the city and moving abroad to avoid being traced. By the summer of 2019, 9-year-old Elias was living with Rolando and Karjan. They had made plans to spend quality time together in the coming months. However, on the morning of July 12, 2019, Rolando found Elias unwell when he went to wish him good morning before leaving for work. Concerned, Rolando took Elias to the children's hospital to see a pediatrician. After an examination, the doctors determined that Elias's condition was critical, and he was rushed to the intensive care unit. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Elias tragically passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. The remarkable thing about Elias's death was that he had been in perfect health when he left home, showing no unusual symptoms, and seemed equally well when he arrived at his father's house. However, the medical report was shocking. It revealed that Elias had died from severe poisoning, which caused his organs to fail and a blood clot in his brain. This news left Elias's parents stunned, as they could not understand how their active and healthy son could have suddenly died from such a mysterious illness. As part of their professional duty, the doctors recommended further forensic investigation. However, Elias's mother and grandmother were too grief-stricken to consider this, and they refused. The funeral home Karjan suggested cremating the body, but Elias's mother declined, preferring to bury her son in a private cemetery where she could visit his grave and lay flowers. Elias's sudden death shattered Rolando's heart, leaving him devastated by the loss of his youngest son. Karjan, who was caring and loving, stood by him every step of the way, never leaving his side. She took charge of all their business affairs, providing him with gentle support and helping him navigate his pain and grief. As time passed, the warmth and love from the woman he cherished gradually eased his suffering. 16 months after the tragedy, Rolando took a major step and proposed to Karjan, and they got married, with Rolando convinced she'd always be by his side. However, their happiness was short-lived. On February 6, 2022, Karjan returned home from a beauty salon and gym visit, and the next day, February 7th, she noticed Rolando was experiencing serious health issues. A medical ambulance was called to their home as Rolando, 35, suddenly felt very ill after vomiting profusely and collapsed in their living room. The housekeeper called for emergency medical help. At the Santa Maria clinic, doctors allowed Karjan to see her husband, but his condition was critical. Despite the medical staff's efforts, Rolando passed away on February 9th. The cause of death was severe poisoning, which raised questions among the medical staff, given Rolando was a healthy and active sportsman. Rolando's wife, Karjan, revealed that he was taking medication to treat dark skin spots. However, this information raised red flags among specialists. Upon further investigation, tests disclosed an abnormal amount of calcium oxalate crystals in Rolando's system, a telling sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient in car antifreeze. The sudden and mysterious death of Rolando sparked a high-priority investigation by the authorities. The prosecutor's office launched a thorough inquiry into the neighborhood where the Aquino couple resided. Neighbors became crucial witnesses, reporting that Karjan had frequently administered her husband unknown medication. They knew she used these drugs to attend a party without her husband. Nevertheless, neighbors also expressed concerns about Rolando's son, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Karjan intended to sedate her husband temporarily, rather than kill him. The Technology Crimes Unit officers' findings completely dismissed the idea that Rolando's death was accidental. They requested forensic examinations and questioned Karjan, Rolando's wife, thoroughly. However, during the interrogation, Karjan's responses were contradictory. The officers asked her to identify the substance she had given her husband before he died, and she claimed it was a skin blemish remedy that she had administered through an IV. When they asked her to produce a vial of the solution, Karjan said the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, had already thrown it away. But when the officers interviewed Claudia, she denied Karjan's statement about the discarded vial. Claudia also revealed that she had overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with his medication. Karjan was detained and her cell phone was seized as part of the investigation. The news of Rolando's death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Those who regularly visited the Aquino couple's warehouse and other locals were also stunned. Everyone struggled to understand what had happened and why the family's father had died so suddenly. Rolando's ex-husband was shocked when rumors started circulating that Karjan had deliberately poisoned him. The ex-husband described Karjan as always being affectionate and never violent towards him. However, an investigation into Karjan's phone revealed that she had searched online for information on the most deadly poisons and ways to erase her search history. Furthermore, records showed that she had ordered ethylene glycol twice from an online store. According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ethylene glycol is a synthetic substance used in antifreeze production, which is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely toxic to humans. Based on forensic evidence and other clues, the prosecutor's office accused Karjan of intentionally poisoning Rolando by mixing the substance with orange juice, which severely damaged his health and ultimately led to his death. A series of strange and tragic events in the Aquino family prompted the authorities to take drastic action. Suspicions arose over the cause of 9-year-old Elias's death, leading to a new investigation. The prosecutor's office launched a detailed probe into the boy's medical history. According to his mother, Elias was healthy and active until he suddenly slipped into a coma at his father's house, never to recover. However, the death certificate stated that the cause was a malfunction of his internal systems and cerebral thrombosis. Investigators doubted that a healthy 9-year-old could have died from such causes. The prosecutor's office requested information on possible ethylene glycol purchases and received a response confirming that Karjan had bought the poison on July 2, 2019, shortly before Elias arrived at the Aquino home. Relatives also confirmed that Karjan insisted on cremating Elias's body, but the birth mother refused, preferring to bury her son. The gathered evidence was sufficient for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file new aggravated murder charges against Karjan on March 4th, related to Elias's poisoning. On March 14th, a judge ordered Karjan's pretrial detention, which she tried to appeal, but the judge rejected, ruling that she should remain in custody until the trial began. The highly anticipated trial commenced on November 28, 2022, at the Mendoza Criminal Court, drawing widespread public and media interest. 2 pending indictments were being addressed, one led by prosecutor Fernando Guzzo, focusing on the murder of Elias, and the other involving Claudia Rios, related to the murder of Rolando. Karjan's defense team sought to counter the charges, claiming that Rolando had a history of violence and abuse, and that there was insufficient reliable evidence to support the allegations. They emphasized that Karjan lacked a motive for the murders, pointing out that she was the sole owner of the house, cars, and business. The defense also argued that the charges against Karjan were unfounded and suggested that her partner might have purchased antifreeze by hacking into her account. Additionally, Karjan claimed to have an alibi for February 6th, the day her husband was poisoned, as she was not at home when he began experiencing health problems. After the initial phase of the trial, the defendant, dubbed the Gumalan poisoner by the media, was given the opportunity to speak. Emotionally, Karjan denied committing the heinous crime, stating that it was extremely distressing for her to be accused of something she did not do, especially considering she was a mother to 2 young daughters. The court hearing continued, with a focus on witness testimony that brought new aspects of the case to light. The prosecution questioned Karjan, targeting key points. Specifically, they asked her if she had suggested cremating her son Rolando. Karjan responded firmly that the decision wasn't hers to make, and she never made such a suggestion. Next, the prosecution called relatives of the deceased to testify, providing more details about what happened. Soledad Elias's mother took the stand, telling the court that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karjan had suggested cremating Elias's body so that both families could keep the boy's ashes. However, Soledad rejected the idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karjan's jealousy. According to her, Karjan and Rolando's relationship was troubled to the point where they even slept in separate beds. Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, was another witness. She stated that her ex-husband Rolando and Karjan slept in separate rooms, although she had never interacted with Karjan before the incident. However, on the morning of February 8th, Karjan called Carolina to inform her that Rolando was ill and hospitalized. Karjan claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell, and asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was seeing another woman. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. When she arrived at the hospital, Karjan was already there, talking to the doctors. Carolina was not allowed to enter, so she waited outside. As she was leaving, Karjan told her that everyone else had left, which made Carolina suspicious. She demanded an explanation from the doctors, who told her that Rolando had lost consciousness and was not responding to treatment. Carolina then complained to the hospital secretary and later spoke to Karjan, who claimed that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. According to Karjan, the medication bottle was no longer available because the housekeeper had thrown it away. The accumulation of these details only served to deepen the mystery surrounding this complex case. As the trial progressed, medical professionals and experts took the stand to present crucial forensic evidence, as well as the findings of a comprehensive psychological examination. This new evidence shed light on previously overlooked details that had gone unnoticed until then. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician at the hospital, recalled Elias's hospitalization in July 2019. At the time, Elias was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing problems and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a severe blood clot in his brain. Elias received intensive care, and Dr. Marinelli confirmed that his symptoms matched those of ethylene glycol poisoning. These symptoms included impaired consciousness, restlessness, and eventually a coma, accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Elias's condition deteriorated, and at 5 p.m. on July 12th, he suffered cardiac and respiratory arrest. Medical personnel, including his father, attempted to resuscitate Elias for 50 minutes, but unfortunately, all efforts were in vain, and he was pronounced dead at 6 p.m. The jury reviewed the results of Karjan's psychological evaluation, which was conducted at the request of the prosecution. The experts' findings indicated that Karjan was dishonest and hid the truth, projecting an image of decency while actually being cold and cruel. Notably, a psychological examination was conducted shortly after her husband's death, but it revealed no emotional impact from the loss, raising questions about her sincerity and reinforcing her portrayal as a self-centered woman. The examiners also detected signs of hidden hostility and impulsive behaviors in Karjan. The prosecutor questioned Karjan's claim of being a victim of gender-based violence, as she had described in her testimony. This information collectively painted a detailed psychological portrait of the defendant. After weeks of tense anticipation and continuous court proceedings, the trial finally reached its conclusion. The packed courtroom was filled with people, their eyes fixed anxiously on the jury and the judge, awaiting the verdict that would bring justice to this complex and tragic case. The prosecutor asked the jury to convict Karjan, emphasizing that the evidence pointed to her as the mastermind and perpetrator of both murders. She bought ethylene glycol, got rid of the packaging, and made it look like regular juice. As a result, her loved ones suffered and died without her assistance. The prosecution and the plaintiff urged the jury to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict, insisting it was the only way to achieve justice. They wanted Karjan to be convicted of murder with evidence of extreme cruelty. In contrast, the defense argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove their client's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They claimed that a person's character, good or bad, doesn't necessarily determine their involvement in a crime, and that for their client, the deaths of Rolando and his son were a devastating tragedy. Despite the defense's arguments, Karjan joined the notorious ranks of Argentine criminals who poisoned their victims. After a lengthy silence and a tense wait for the verdict, the jury delivered their decision. In a unanimous verdict, they found Karjan guilty of murdering Elias and committing the crime with exceptional cruelty. Additionally, they convicted her of Rolando's aggravated death, which was caused by an insidious procedure. Karjan, dressed in black with white beads around her neck, remained expressionless as she heard the verdict. The jury's guilty verdict resulted in her receiving a life sentence in prison. Karjan, the defendant, attempted to evade punishment for the treacherous murders that shocked society and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies may have been her final attempt to avoid the punishment she deserved. Nevertheless, the court and jury remained unmoved by her tactics and delivered a just verdict. Why did Karjan kill her loved ones? This question remains unanswered, a mystery that continues to baffle. On the surface, she had everything one could ask for to be happy. Yet perhaps the root of her motive lay hidden in the recesses of her own soul, driven by jealousy, self-interest, or an inflated sense of pride. Despite the heinous nature of her crime, Karjan refused to acknowledge her guilt, leaving the true motives behind this dark act unclear. Now, as Canova faces a lengthy prison sentence, she will have ample time to reflect on the dark forces that may have consumed her, ultimately destroying not only her own life, but also those around her. This tragic tale serves as a poignant reminder that even in the closest of relationships, terrible secrets and mysteries can lurk beneath the surface, and that true love and loyalty must always be our guiding principles. The case of Cherie Miller. Bruce and Cherie were both born and raised in Flint, Michigan, a city that was once a thriving hub of the Midwest auto industry, but had since fallen on hard times. Cherie Peck Keithley Miller was born on October 13, 1971, and by her own account, she had a deeply troubled childhood. Without a father figure in her life, Cherie grew up in a trailer with her mother, who struggled with addiction and had a string of unstable relationships with men. These men often abused Cherie, starting when she was just 3 or 4 years old. By the time she was 16, Cherie was on her own, and at 17 she got married, became pregnant, and had a child. However, the marriage didn't last, and she remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, was convicted of second-degree child abuse after brutally assaulting his own child, causing multiple skull fractures. Tribby was also accused of abusing Cherie's 6-year-old daughter, but he was acquitted due to lack of evidence. Cherie seemed to have a pattern of attracting the wrong kind of men, always searching for someone who could provide her with financial security and emotional stability. By the time she was 26, Cherie found herself a single mother of 3, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, including a position at a nursing home and selling Mary Kay cosmetics. While she wasn't a conventional beauty, Cherie was charismatic and attractive. In 1997, she took a job as an accountant at B&A Auto Salvage, a company owned by 47-year-old Bruce Miller. At this point, Cherie saw Bruce as the kind of stable, successful partner who could finally provide her with the comfort and security she had always been missing. Bruce Leroy Miller was born on July 26, 1951. In his younger years, he worked at General Motors, a common career path for many Flint residents. After leaving GM, Bruce went on to own and operate an auto junkyard, where he would accept old cars and resell their parts. Bruce had 3 marriages and enjoyed activities such as racing and socializing. He was known for his generosity and openness. Initially, Bruce showed no romantic interest in Cherie Keithley, his new employee, but rather offered her support as a single mother facing difficult circumstances. However, Cherie eventually caught his attention, and despite their 20-year age difference, an office romance blossomed. Bruce was flattered by the attention of a younger woman, and they quickly moved from dating to living together. The couple got married on April 23, 1999, in one of Las Vegas's chapels, just 4 months into their relationship. After the wedding, Cherie and her children moved in with Bruce, providing her with the stability she had long sought. Bruce's brother, Chuck Miller, revealed on the TV show Snapped that Cherie often praised Bruce, saying he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, as he provided her with a normal life and the means to make her happy. Chuck's wife, Judy, added that Bruce was smitten with the young, attractive blonde, whom he considered the perfect wife. While friends voiced concerns about Cherie's excessive spending habits, which went beyond her means, Bruce chose to ignore it. Cherie would later admit that she had been trying to fill a constant void by instantly maxing out her credit cards and spending all the cash she could find. Despite her friends' misgivings, Bruce remained unconcerned about his wife's spending habits. Cherie, a hard worker, had a job as a Mary Kay cosmetic saleswoman, allowing her to sell products to customers at home or while traveling across the country to manage her accounts. In fact, Bruce even bought her a computer to support her work. The turning point came with this purchase. In 1999, Cherie Miller stumbled upon adult chat rooms while using her home computer to research a vacation destination. At the time, social networking didn't exist, and text messaging was not common. Instead, people connected with each other in online chat rooms, some of which were adult in nature and allowed users to flirt anonymously, share fantasies, and engage in virtual romances. According to friends, Bruce was aware of his wife's online flirting, but didn't see it as a problem. He loved his wife, was happily married, and planned to adopt her children. He preferred to trust her rather than letting suspicions overshadow their family life. Cherie soon became comfortable in the virtual world and began regularly logging into chat rooms, sharing her deepest sexual fantasies with strangers under various aliases. Detective Kevin Shanlian, who investigated the murder case, testified that Cherie had at least 25 different aliases. In 2016, Cherie admitted that she was glued to the computer. She explained that Bruce worked at the store and had his own business, so he was often away. Cherie spent hours flirting online, driven by a need to control everything. She obsessively controlled people who trusted her, treating every man and every relationship like a new level in a video game, each one more challenging than the last. Among the men Cherie Miller met online was Jerry Cassidy, who used the pseudonym Rena Dudes. Born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri, Jerry was a married man who raised a son, enjoyed deer hunting with his brothers, and had a dream of becoming an FBI agent while working as a homicide detective. However, when he reported corruption involving falsified records to a coworker, he faced retaliation, was demoted, and eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Despite doing the right thing, the experience ended his career. Depression, drinking, and substance abuse followed, which led to the breakdown of his marriage. Later, Jerry got his life back on track, moved to Reno, Nevada, and became a security guard at Harrah's Casino. In his free time, he frequented chat rooms where he met Cherie Miller. Their online correspondence turned passionate, and in July 1999, they met in person in Reno, where Cherie claimed to be attending a Mary Kay convention with a friend. The online romance blossomed into a physical affair, and Jerry thought his life was finally taking a turn for the better. Cherie presented herself as a wealthy businesswoman living with a disabled husband who was seeking a discreet sexual encounter. Jerry believed her, as his friend Carol Slaughter would later recall. At the time, Jerry was at a low point in his life. His marriage had ended, and he was in a new neighborhood with no friends. He became deeply infatuated with Cherie, telling Carol Slaughter that Cherie was exceptional in the bedroom. Throughout the summer and fall, Cherie used her cosmetics business as a front for frequent trips to Reno, where she would secretly meet with Jerry. The two exchanged explicit emails and instant messages, including intimate videos, and even went so far as to rename their online accounts, with Cherie calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Cherie's Fool. Despite his background as a cop, Jerry seemingly failed to notice any red flags, blinded as he was by Cherie's professions of love. Whether due to naivety, flaws, or emotional vulnerability, Jerry proved to be an easy target for Cherie's manipulation. She quickly wove a web of deceit, convincing him that he needed to kill her husband. The impact on Jerry was evident to those around him. His friends noted that after Cherie entered the picture, he became increasingly erratic, exhibiting symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He would be overly excited and energetic before her visits, only to plummet into painful depression after she left. As early as September, Cherie claimed to be pregnant with Cassidy's child, sending Jerry fake evidence, including doctored photos, a forged positive pregnancy test, and even fake belly pictures. Shortly after, she feigned that her husband Bruce had discovered her infidelity, beating her and causing her to miscarry. Unbeknownst to Jerry, Cherie had actually undergone a tubal ligation in 1995, rendering her sterile. Jerry had no reason to doubt her lies, and so he believed every word. After losing the baby, Cherie announced that she was pregnant again, this time with twins. Jerry begged her to leave her abusive husband Bruce, take the children, and come live with him. Cherie feared for her life and Jerry's, claiming Bruce had mafia connections and wouldn't let them leave. Despite her fears, Cherie continued to secretly meet Jerry in Reno. During one of these meetings, Jerry was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct at a casino, which temporarily halted their online communication. After his release, Jerry decided to protect Cherie from further danger by distancing himself from her and returning to Missouri to reconcile with his family. The online relationship continued, with Cherie sending Jerry photos of her ultrasound and growing belly. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received an ominous email, allegedly from Bruce, threatening to prevent the twins' birth. Alarmed, Jerry tried to contact Cherie but received a message from her hours later, saying she had to leave for a few days. The next day, Jerry received a message from Bruce, revealing that he had forced Cherie to have an abortion. The message included disturbing photos of a battered Cherie. Jerry had reached his breaking point. The tragic deaths of his twin children at the hands of Bruce Miller had left him devastated and consumed by anger. He held Bruce responsible not only for the loss of his 3 children, but also for the suffering of the woman he loved. The next day, November 8th, Jerry confided in Cherie, declaring his intention to kill her husband. Together, they began to orchestrate a plan to take his life. They carefully mapped out routes, identified ideal parking spots, and pinpointed the perfect location and time to dispose of the body. Jerry then embarked on the long journey from his home to Michigan. As Bruce prepared to leave work, he received a call from Cherie, following their plan. She asked him to pick up a pizza on his way home, distracting him from the impending danger. Unaware of the threat lurking behind him, Bruce failed to notice Jerry approaching, shotgun in hand, before he pulled the trigger. After committing the crime, Jerry returned home while Cherie set the next part of their plan in motion. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, pretending to be worried about her husband's prolonged absence, and requested that he drive to the junkyard to check on him. When Chuck arrived, he found his brother's lifeless body on the floor, lying in a pool of blood, with a close-range shotgun wound to the chest. Witnesses reported that Cherie reacted with screams and tears upon learning of Bruce's death. The crime scene was promptly discovered, but the perpetrator had left behind no trace or evidence. Investigators found that Bruce typically carried large sums of cash, leading them to initially suspect that his death might have been the result of a botched robbery, since his wallet was missing. Suspicion fell on John Hutchinson, a friend and employee who had recently borrowed $2,000 from Bruce. Police questioned Hutchinson, searched his home, and seized his weapons, but he denied any involvement. Although Hutchinson failed a polygraph test, the investigation proved inconclusive, and he was eventually released. A theory that the murder was committed to falsify vehicle identification numbers was explored, but none of the leads panned out, and the case was eventually closed. In the meantime, Cherie's behavior seemed suspicious to Judy Miller, the sister of Bruce, the victim. Just 2 days after her husband's death, Cherie was seen dancing happily in a bar in Otisville, Michigan. 2 weeks later, she had already started dating a local delivery boy named Jeff Foster, not Jerry Cassidy, her supposed lover. Jerry Cassidy had expected to be with Cherie after the murder, but she started to distance herself from him instead. A month after the murder, Cherie moved her new boyfriend into her house and cut ties with Jerry, leaving him heartbroken. It was likely at this point that Jerry realized he had murdered an innocent man due to Cherie's manipulation, and feelings of guilt overwhelmed him. He transformed from Cherie's lover to an investigator and discovered that all the accusations were fabricated by Cherie herself. On February 11, 2000, Jerry took his own life in his apartment in Odessa, Missouri, using a .22 caliber rifle. His body was discovered in a chair with an open Bible on his lap. The Bible was open to Matthew 5, which contains the passage, "Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be liable to judgment." It seemed that Jerry had judged himself, confessed his guilt, and taken his own life as punishment. Cassidy's mother revealed in an interview a few days after the body was removed that while cleaning the apartment, family members found a briefcase containing 3 suicide notes and an envelope attached to the outside. Jerry's motive was revenge against the woman who had broken his heart. In his confession, the former detective explained that he had killed Bruce Miller because he believed at the time that Bruce had abused Cherie and was responsible for the deaths of his 3 children. However, the letter also revealed that Cherie Miller had lied to Jerry about Bruce's behavior. On February 22, 2000, police arrested Cherie Miller as she arrived at the airport with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster, after a trip to Reno. She was charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors believed that Cherie was a skilled manipulator who had convinced Jerry to kill her husband under false pretenses. Despite the evidence against her, Cherie maintained her innocence to her deceased husband's family. On December 12, 2000, the trial of Cherie Miller began in the state of Michigan, generating widespread national attention due to the unusual nature of the internet-related crime. The public's interest was exceptionally high. The prosecution presented thousands of messages exchanged between Cherie and Jerry, revealing the numerous lies she had told. Cherie claimed she had undergone a fallopian tube ligation years prior, and therefore could not be pregnant with Jerry's children, and that she had never been abused. However, the prosecution alleged that Cherie wanted her husband Bruce dead for financial gain, as a divorce would not have provided her with sufficient money. In contrast, the defense argued that Cherie received only a minimal sum after Bruce's death and would have enjoyed a more affluent lifestyle had she remained married. The defense also suggested that Jerry Cassidy was seeking revenge as a spurned lover and had fabricated evidence against Cherie. Cherie told the jury that her online sexual communications with Jerry were merely a fantasy, and that she had lied about her pregnancy to help him cope with depression and about the abuse to deter him from contacting her. Cherie vehemently denied writing the messages that described the crime, implying that Jerry had forged them using his expertise as a homicide detective. However, the police discovered evidence of the messages on Cherie's computer. The online correspondence played a crucial role in the trial. Miller was convicted on December 22nd, receiving a life sentence for murder and 54 to 81 years for conspiracy. In 2007, while incarcerated, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues. Miller began treatment and filed an appeal, even getting married for the fourth time. Michael DeNoia saw Miller's story on the news and was captivated by her charm. He wrote to her, and in 2008, he visited her in prison, proposing during the visit. Although some reports claim they got married in April 2008, there is no evidence to support this. In 2008, Miller's conviction was overturned on appeal, and she was released from prison in 2009. A federal judge ruled that Jerry's suicide letter should not have been considered evidence, as Cassidy was deceased and the defense could not cross-examine him. The judge ordered a new trial and released Miller on bail. In 2012, Cherie was returned to jail to resume serving her original sentence, following a court ruling that re-evaluated the admissibility of the suicide letter. Having spent 3 years outside, Cherie continued to proclaim her innocence. In 2016, Cherie Miller unexpectedly confessed to her role in her husband's death in a 4-page letter to a judge. Many saw this as a bid for sympathy or profit. Cherie wrote that being sent back to prison after 3 years of freedom triggered her admission. She was devastated to leave her daughter and granddaughter behind, and the full weight of her actions hit her. She described her husband as a great man who only loved and wanted to adopt her children, and she was filled with remorse for ordering his killing. Cherie gave a 2022 TV interview, confessing Bruce wasn't mob-connected and didn't abuse her. She faked bruises and ultrasound scans to control Jerry, fearing Bruce would discover her true identity. Cherie knew Jerry's depression and had evidence, but thought she could manipulate the jury. She rejected a 15-year plea bargain, leading to a life sentence. Now incarcerated, Cherie seeks peace, saying it's hard to face her actions. The case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money, and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter.